It begins with a silence so heavy, it feels like the world is holding its breath. A silence that lives in the moments before disaster, when everything still looks normal, when nobody realizes how fragile life truly is. And on April 20th, 1999, inside Columbine High School in Colorado, that silence was seconds away from breaking. Students poured into the building the same way they always did, joking with friends, dragging backpacks, texting, complaining about homework, thinking about prom, tests, weekend plans. Teachers were setting up lessons. Counselors brewed their morning coffee. The school buzzed with normal teenage life. A calm morning, a safe morning. A morning built on the belief that schools are the last place where unimaginable violence could ever happen. But two students knew that illusion was about to die. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold walked toward Columbine, wearing the same long black trench coats they had worn countless times before. But today, the coats were different, heavier, stiff, packed with devastation. Hidden beneath the fabric were shotguns, carbines, ammunition, knives, pipe bombs, propane bombs, and a level of hatred the school had never seen. What the world did not know was that this day was the climax of a full year of obsession, planning, building, fantasizing. Every journal entry, every video, every drawing was another step toward destruction. Eric's anger didn't whisper, it roared. His writings read like declarations of war. He raged about superiority, domination, wiping out those he believed were beneath him. His sense of power grew with every fantasy he recorded. He saw himself as a commander of chaos, someone whose name would echo long after he was gone. Dylan's suffering was quieter, but just as dangerous. His notebooks weren't filled with rage. They were filled with heartbreak, with loneliness, with pages begging for escape, begging for peace he believed he would never find. Depression dragged him deeper every year, and isolation twisted his thoughts into darker shapes. Two boys with different wounds, two minds spiraling in opposite directions. Yet somehow, they collided, and that collision built a plan capable of breaking a nation. Together, they fed each other's darkest ideas. Together, they normalized violence. Together, they created a fantasy of destruction that neither would have pursued alone. They tested explosives in empty fields. They practiced shooting deep in the woods. They recorded basement tapes, predicting their legacy and declaring their intentions to the world. They gathered weapons through loopholes, deceit, and friends who had no idea what the guns were truly for. Their main objective was simple. Not a shooting, but a bombing. A bombing designed to rival Oklahoma City. A bombing meant to kill hundreds in seconds. They built nearly 100 homemade explosive devices, pipe bombs, CO2 bombs, propane devices, timing mechanisms. They drew maps of the school, studying the patterns of foot traffic, calculating how many people they could kill, planning exits, timing, and secondary explosions. The heart of their plan was two large propane bombs placed inside the cafeteria at the busiest moment of the day. If they exploded, the floor would have collapsed into the library above, burying students under rubble. Those who survived the blast would be killed by fire, shrapnel, smoke, or the shooters waiting outside with rifles aimed at the fleeing survivors. But the bombs didn't ignite. A malfunction changed everything. And with their original plan shattered, Eric and Dylan pivoted, moving toward the school entrance with guns drawn. Two students, Rachel Scott and Richard Castaldo, were eating lunch outside on the grass, unaware their lives were seconds from horror. The first shots rang out. Rachel was killed instantly. Richard collapsed, paralyzed, bleeding, barely clinging to life. Screams broke the illusion of safety. Students ran, ducked, froze. Some thinking it was a senior prank, others instantly realizing the truth. Eric and Dylan stormed up the west staircase, firing at 3 more students. 1 was killed. 2 were critically wounded. The sounds echoed through the hallways as confusion turned into panic. Inside, Teacher Dave Sanders recognized the danger instantly. He sprinted across the cafeteria, shouting for students to run, to hide, to escape. He directed hundreds towards safety, pushing them into classrooms, locking doors, guiding them away from danger. His heroism saved countless lives. But as he ran through a hallway, he crossed paths with the shooters and was shot. He would later die from his wounds after students tried desperately to keep him alive. And then came the library. The place students believed was the safest room in the school became the center of unimaginable horror. 50 students were inside, working quietly, joking with friends, studying for tests, listening to music through headphones. None of them imagined that 2 armed classmates were moments from entering the room. At 11:29 a.m., Eric and Dylan burst inside. Gunshots filled the air. Glass shattered. Computers exploded. Students screamed and ducked beneath tables. Many thought it was a prank, until the shooters turned their guns toward hiding places. In the next 7 minutes, the library became the deadliest location in the building. Kyle Velasquez died instantly, shot without warning. Stephen Curnow next, the youngest victim. Cassie Bernal, hiding under a desk, was shot at point-blank range. Isaiah Schulz, singled out with racial slurs, was murdered beneath a table. Kelly Fleming was hit while crawling across the floor, trying desperately to reach safety. Daniel Mauser, in a final act of courage, tried to push away Eric's gun before being shot. 7 minutes. 7 minutes of begging, praying, whispering, trembling hands, and shattered lives. 10 students murdered, 12 wounded, dozens traumatized for life. Some survived because the shooters simply didn't check their table. Some survived by playing dead. Some survived because fate chose them, for reasons no one will ever understand. After leaving the library, the shooters wandered aimlessly. The adrenaline that fueled them slowly drained into exhaustion. Their aggression flickered like a dying flame. They fired into empty rooms, empty hallways, broken windows, no longer pursuing targets, just fading. At 12:08 p.m., inside the same library where they had inflicted the most devastation, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold ended their own lives. The attack was over, but the suffering was not. SWAT teams swept the school classroom by classroom, terrified of hidden bombs. Students covered in blood and dust were escorted outside with trembling hands raised in the air. Some collapsed into the arms of loved ones. Others stood silently, unable to process what had happened. Parents waited outside, praying to hear their child's name called. Some reunited with their kids in tears. Others waited for hours, until waiting turned into mourning. Investigators uncovered bomb after bomb, journal after journal, video after video, each piece revealing just how carefully orchestrated the attack had been. Every clue painted a darker, more disturbing picture. Across America, grief turned into anger. Anger turned into questions. Questions turned into painful truth. The FBI's psychological analysis was chilling. Eric, manipulative, calculating, narcissistic, lacking empathy. Dylan, depressed, suicidal, emotionally overwhelmed. Together, they ignited each other's worst impulses. Columbine forced the nation to examine mental health failures, bullying, isolation, gun access, school security, and the silent suffering of teens who fall through society's cracks. For survivors, the trauma didn't end when the shooting stopped. It lived in nightmares, in survivor's guilt, in PTSD, in the sound of slamming doors, in empty seats at family tables, in memories that refuse to fade. Columbine didn't just change a community, it changed a country. It exposed the fragile illusion of safety. It revealed how easily violence can hide in plain sight. It forced schools, parents, and lawmakers to confront a horrifying reality. If we ignore the lonely, if we overlook the angry, if we fail to see the suffering, we risk tragedies that rewrite history. And on that day, inside Columbine High School, the world learned just how devastating that failure can be.